was my exploration of humanity through fiction. In terms of humanity and the facets of what makes it, I wanted to explore each of them. So the first book focuses more on the body aspect. The second one is more psychology and mental aspect. And the third one is the soul. We have two narratives. One character is in the real world, and it's like the different levels. It's almost like a video game in that sense. They have to face different challenges and different things. The other part of that narrative is taking place in Hayun. Hayun is the mid-dimension. In between heaven and earth, there is several things, including this mid-dimension. It is basically the subconscious of the world. So it is molded by what is the tendency of the world at that time. Since we're the dominant species, not the most frequent, because that's insects, but in terms of shaping the world, we're the assholes responsible for what happens most times. So that shapes and forms this subconscious world where everyone's kind of lost.
Here with the one and only JD Estrada.
One and only, that makes me feel special.
You are special. You're very special because on this occasion we're going to be talking about the human cycle, and you finally finished it.
I appreciate that so much. You're one of the few people that actually know that it's the human cycle. People go like the Being Human series, and I'm like, try again. The only human series. I'm like, that's the first title, Human Cycle. And it's made me question if I should change the title of the series. But for now, I'm insisting on the human cycle just because it makes sense with the whole concept.
Of course, yeah, and going full circle, obviously.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the story does kind of end up in a full circle, sort of. Each of these books has been self-serving in several ways.
Mm-hmm.
And this last book was also my opportunity to say goodbye to a lot of people in my direct life and people whom I'm very fond of.
Mm-hmm.
The only spoiler I'm going to say is that there is a scene where there's a character based on Chris Cornell.
Mm.
Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a grunge boy.
Yeah.
I'm a poster child for what a 90s rocker is. I think I grew better.
Mm.
But in terms of wearing plaid and the bands I hear, when we lost Chris, that was a really awful week for me. And for me and a couple of friends. People go like, yeah, but did you know him? And I'm like, you don't get it. That's it's completely fine if you don't get it.
Yeah.
But it offered me an opportunity for that and to get closure in different things.
Yeah. I mean, you've always been somebody, and you're not shy about talking about it, that has been super influenced by pop culture, by music, and you utilize that. Maybe not to the nth degree of, putting it in there as a Easter egg, but you utilize it as something, a jumping off point or a point where you want to make a point based off of that.
It's okay. There's a character based on Chris Cornell, but it's no accident that there's a character named Jeremy in the series, and it's no accident there's a character named Edward Louis.
Right. Yeah.
It's so little on the nose. And I have characters based on songs, and I have characters based on lyrics, and I have characters based on different lead men or lead singers that influence me. But in terms of the DNA, Tool is very much at the center of in terms of influences.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Wings for Marie Parts 1 and 2,
mm-hmm.
that was the driving force for, let's say, the ethos of the bad guy, because he wants his wings.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen when someone will do anything in their power to get possession and control of heaven.
Yeah.
And you see certain pastors that you go, I don't get a good vibe from that, and I took it to the extreme,
mm-hmm.
because there's some people that at one point they might be righteous, they might be
mm-hmm.
pure, and they can get corrupted, and anyone can get corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an exploration of that. And people go like, but they're most people are Therians or they're photogeni or they're angels or they're demons. There's not that many humans. Yeah, on purpose.
Yeah.
When you see a character that is a human, it's for a very, very, very important reason.
Yeah.
People, unless we have one of those bourbon-infused 3-hour conversations, we're not going to get to the bottom of it. But
Yeah.
it is a conscious decision. It's good versus evil, but it's the evil at one point was good.
Yeah.
And what is good now is extremely, drastically flawed.
But something utilizing music, right, as an influence. Mm-hmm. There's a cadence to music. There's a way, and this being a musician, constructing a song goes, right? And so constructing a novel with that influence in your brain, do you find that you are finding a natural pacing? Do you have to kind of slow yourself down? Do you have to speed yourself up? How do you feel about when you're truly expressing the influence?
Well, it depends on the chapter and it depends on the book.
Okay.
And again, when you bring music into the equation, that does make a lot of sense. And I did go Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear,
right,
in terms of rhythm. The first novel starts off slow because I'm setting up a lot of stuff, and I know that it's a lot of stuff, but I busted my absolute ass to make all that world building worth it.
Yeah.
And that you see things that appear in chapter 4, book 1 being resolved in book 3.
Yeah.
And that was really important for me for so many reasons. But let's go back to the rhythm. So it starts really slow, and then when it breaks and it starts to move, it really picks up. Mm-hmm. So basically the first 12 chapters are going to take you as long as the rest of the book. Mm-hmm. That wasn't intentional. That's just how it came about. And the first novel includes so many things in my trajectory as an author. Mm-hmm. Right now, I see that in this time capsule when I found my voice as an author, when the story took over and I stopped trying to impress people with my word usage. Yeah. Oh, that's a really fancy sentence. And you feel that shift. And it's for me, when I'm reading it, it's very apparent because I remember the feeling of when it stopped being a war of attrition and it's like, oh, we're going someplace. Yeah. And then eventually the entire series pulled me with it. The second book is a little on the relentless side. And you finish a chapter, and my intention is that when you finish a chapter, you want to slap me in the face and say like, dude, I got to get work done. I got to sleep or something, but I got to read one more page. Right. And that was absolutely intentional and something I had a lot of fun with. Yeah. And Only Human has a lot of variety, and it is who I am as a person at that point. Yeah. So it includes stuff that's very fantastical, very mystical, very existential. Yeah. Whimsical parts, really dark parts, and stuff like that. The second one is a lot darker. Yeah. In general, it's a lot darker, and it's meant to be a lot darker. It's Shadow of a Human. It's the exploration of human psyche. It's a reconciliation with your reflection, with your shadow, with your inner child, and with your either anima or your inner male presence. Yeah. In the case of one character, it's him reconciling with his female aspect. Right. Because we're taught so often that we should embrace our female side. Yeah. And then in the last one, I wanted it to it's not a slow burn, but it's not a barn burner either. It's something that you start and it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And then it eventually resolves itself. And what I wanted it to be a very comfortable rhythm for the reader, for the writer as well. And yes, it does have its crescendo, and then it does wind down. But I wanted it to be a bit more even and not so manic as Shadow of a Human. And again, intentional, because when you're going from one plane of existence to another, it's not something that you should take lightly or do it quickly. Yeah. So again, each one, if you see it as a song, it just, you have one that might be mid-tempo, one that's really hard and fast, and then the last one, it's almost like a mantra, and it's meant to be a comfortable read.
You had some struggles with the third book and trying to finish it and get through it and everything like that. Did you feel like it was a structural issue? Was it a mental issue? What was blocking you from completing the third book? You feel like
I was going through a lot of things, from mom passing away in 2019 to the pandemic to really rough things that I went through in a previous job that really affected me.
Yeah.
And just stuff that, you're trying to have fun, you're trying to connect with a narrative, but life it's not throwing curveballs.
Right.
It's throwing a fastball at your face.
Right.
So it was a lot of that, and then other people passed away, and it's like, I want to include that, and it's stuff that I go like, it feels important that I include that person, and versus other books, the writing of the human cycle has always been organic and very welcoming in that sense. When something important in my life happens and I get an idea, I go like, I have to follow the instinct to that idea, because it's not something forced. It's not something that you go like, whatever. It's something that for some reason it's important. And I go like, man, I should really include that. That's one. And then you ask about structure. Yeah. My outline was not solid. And I realized when I was transcribing, and I go like, oh, there's overlap, and there's characters that are in more than one place. And then I gave myself a lot of problems. Yeah. And then when I'm reading, I go like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I'm sitting and I'm trying to be a writer and do writerly things. And then I go like, okay, let it go. Yeah. And then go for a walk. Yeah. And then I'm going for a walk, or I'm having a shower, and suddenly the solution that I get is so much better. Yeah. Endlessly better for so many reasons. And that happened a lot. And I had to embrace that part of the process, which is scary, because it's like, okay, I know that I messed this part up. Yeah. How am I going to fix it? And I know that my brain is hyperactive enough and creative enough that I'm going to come up with a really good solution.
You mentioned how people have commented about the first book and kind of, and you mentioned you found yourself as a writer in that process. Do you feel like you found yourself in a different way with the third book as a writer? Do you feel like that because you were going through so much and you were utilizing that as tools for your craft, that, I mean, you do that anyway with most things you write, but for this particular one where you knew this was really important to you to finish this?
There's so many things. I've read so many series that the last book, they dropped the ball on it, and that was also part of the struggle. But discovering part of who I am as a writer and as a person, that happens with even a poem. Yeah. And I find new things, and when I find solutions,
it just felt like this one was more important in that aspect.
The first one, it started as a whim, and then it became personal. The second one was me following it up, and the third one is putting to the side the frustration of a middle child book that kind of gets attention but doesn't get the love that it gets until you finish the series. There's a hell of a lot more weight. Yeah. And again, for me, that Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear, I wanted to strike a balance that I was happy with. Yeah. And I'm an asshole with myself. And I'm like, it's not there. It's not there. It's not there. And this was a case where the first part was really strong, the ending was really strong, and the middle part lagged or was missing something. And what happened, I wanted it to always be 44 chapters, and I was locked into that until I told myself, dude, drop it.
Yeah, kind of a silly thing, right?
It could be interesting, but when it gets in the way of you and the craft or the story, then it is meaningless. It's pointless, and it is you just being. It's good to be stubborn about certain things. And it's good to look at something that's not helping you out and say, screw it. Yeah. This one is, I think the final count was 56 chapters with the prologue. Always read the prologue. Always. People go, oh, prologues suck. And I'm like, okay, you haven't read mine, first off, and you haven't read prologues that have an intention. So it's prologue, epilogue, plus 56 chapters. For me, it's always important because the prologues have a certain feel to them, and the epilogues have a certain feel to them. For again, it's all very, 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 very intentional. The prologues, it is the same person that is always speaking. Yeah, and you should pay attention to what is being said always. from the get-go in the third book, when you read the prologue, you go like, oh, what the hell? And I really enjoyed including a really big plot twist in a prologue, because people, so often they skip prologues, and I go like, you should.
Yeah.
And then with the epilogue, it's that
you had the same philosophy that Marvel had about the end credits.
It's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little bit of that. Just an extra scene, an extra snippet that makes you go like, huh.
Yeah.
And just to develop either the relationship of certain characters, or for you to get like a little more of a glimpse, or for you to realize that there might be other stuff. And I did tie up a lot of loose ends, but I did leave a couple of open doors. People go like, oh, are you going to do more in this world? And I'm like, not right now. Give me time. But I did want to allow myself that possibility, because apart from everything, apart from it being very personal, apart from it being very important to me on a personal level, not just as an author. Beyond that, it's been very enjoyable, and it's got me through some really tough times, and I want to have that door open. Even if it's not apparent, it was very self-serving in the sense that it was very cathartic or healing.
Yeah.
And that to allow something to be cathartic, you just have to accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
And for something to be healing, you have to embrace the healing aspect of it.
Yeah.
And that goes, when people read it, they're going to know when I was hurting, and when I was mending, and when I was healing, and when I was letting go. And it's very intentional. And those moments were primarily for me. And I wanted to show something that personal, that deep, because for me,
you didn't worry about the vulnerability of it.
If anyone wants to take advantage of it and be an asshole, by all means, it's not going to be a good look. For me, being vulnerable, being human, being empathetic, I've learned a lot of things from making mistakes.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot of things from pain.
Yeah.
And people, it's always that pursuit to avoid pain. And I get why. Pain hurts.
Yeah.
Emotional, mental, spiritual, physical. It hurts.
Yeah.
And it hurts to different degrees. And some of them have different aspects. When I've had a back injury, I feel old and I feel weak.
Yeah.
And you're so used to kind of being your cheeky, invincible self that when you can't go to take a piss by yourself, it puts things into perspective, and it makes you appreciate things. I think more than anything, the human condition is designed to help you appreciate what you have, the good and the bad. The thing about the main character, Daniel Reynolds, is that he's invited to go on this journey, and he doesn't have many options. But even though he hates his job, even though he's jaded, even though he's human in the most lethargic, oh my God, life sucks way, he allows himself the opportunity to go on an adventure. Does it almost cost him his life and humanity? Certainly. Continuously. Constantly. And he has to face some crazy things. But I think my favorite adventures are the ones where the character goes like, screw it, let's go for it.
Yeah.
The main people who are the saving grace in this series aren't the men.
Yeah.
The women are either the people with the strategy, or the people with a solution, or the people with the grit that get stuff done. And in the other characters, it's not that they aren't important. It's that, the heavy hitters, continuously the women. Yeah. And that's something that I really wanted to explore. And I think it's something that if I don't call out, people go like, oh, but why? And I go like, dude, did you read it?
Yeah. The other thing about this series in particular that you've mentioned before, but it is apparent right away, is your love for subverting tropes and pushing tropes out of the way and making something uniquely special with with the aspects, vampires being one of those obvious ones, right? And
I didn't want vampires that had the poses. I don't think any of my vampires hiss, and I just wanted to. Do they have to? Do you have to
know? Right.
A vampire hisses, obviously, and I'm like, why? And the way that how I explored the variation between one being and another is the cardinal points. And the cardinal points and what people can access, anyone can access those cardinal points. And those are like pressure points that you can unlock abilities. It's like your superpowers, and everyone has those superpowers inherently within them.
Yeah.
Some people have more, some people have less, some are stronger, some are less intense, but everyone has them. So basically, you could have a character that has the same powers being a Therian or a vampire or a photogenic or an angel. And the difference is simply how long they've been alive, what they have allowed themselves to experience, and what they've gone through. Because sometimes to unlock something, you have to go through something.
How important is it to you that readers latch onto something, not necessarily a character or a situation, but latch onto something within themselves? Is that the aim for you with these books, is to kind of, because they are existential, they are spiritual, they are emotional, right? And so is that where you will get the most pleasure from readers talking to you about it?
I think the greatest pleasure is having people question. It's like, why do these vampires have that? And I'm like, why can't they? Why is this angel behaving in that way? And I'm like, why can't they? Why is that devil or demon positive and helping out?
Yeah.
Why can't they? It's always the why can't they? People are very used to things being clearly cut, like, good versus evil. And I included more than one demon on the side of good.
Yeah.
And without being preachy and stuff like that, a demon and an angel and anyone can be either inspired or jaded. And for me, it's to see that experience, life, reality.
Yeah.
It's there to be experienced, and you can do what you will.
Yeah.
If you wanna do something positive, you can.
Yeah.
If you want to waste your life and bitch about everything, or be awful, that's also an option. But at every step of the way, being able to question.
Yeah.
That's the goal is for people to read that book and fact check it. Yeah. Did that happen in Myanmar? And I'm like, yeah. Is that what he wrote about Sri Lanka, is that real? I'm like, fact check me. And if I'm wrong, I'm not going to change it because it's already published it. But and I can say, artistic liberties. But the research there, it was made, and it was very intentional. One aspect that I can say that I included in the book, there's a place in Sri Lanka that's called Adam's Peak. Adam's Peak is called that way because there's a depression that looks like a big ass foot stepped on, because that's where Adam landed. Right. This is Sri Lanka. Yeah. So Sri Lanka has India and China there. Yeah. But this place is very important for Judeo-Christian religion. Yeah. But it's also important for Indian religion. Yeah. And it's also it's important for all religions. Why? Yeah. And I left that pebble there so that people can go down with that rabbit hole.
This series, it took you on a journey as a creator, it took you on a journey as a person, it took you on a journey as an artist in a lot of respects, and it took you on a journey as a publisher in a lot of respects as well. Yeah. And I know how much that meant to you and how much you hold about that aspect of it. I'm not asking you what's coming next, but I'm asking
you can ask what's coming next.
What I really want to know though is, do you feel like whatever you do from here forward, there's going to be that this experience is going to give you a better plan, a better idea, or do you feel like that was one exploration I made, and I'm going to journey into something else and try something differently?
I'm always going to be willing to try something different. I'm happy the way that this series transpired, and I'm happy with my trajectory as an author, because I've taught readers who follow and read me that you don't know what I'm gonna pull out of the bag. Yeah. It's like, hey, he's got a nonfiction book. Yeah, but wasn't he writing about vampires? And I'm like, yeah. And then the poetry, and then wicked nursery rhymes, and then whimsical short stories, and then a middle grade novel. Right. Because I see the authors that I look up to, and I see what they've done, and it's not that I model myself after them. It's that I see them embracing their passions and just going for it.
Right.
And I've just done it on my terms. If I have another series, I'm probably going to write the entire series before publishing it, just because I don't think psychologically I can survive that again. And in terms of projects that are upcoming, I have several standalone books that are getting outlined. I'm working on a short story collection, and I've already written from there about 4 or 5 short stories.
Okay.
It's going to be speculative, but when I say speculative, the definition of speculative fiction is just pretty much anything that lands under fiction.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. There's a story of an older gentleman that has a leak in his house is flooding, and there's another one that's a retelling of a great mythology. It's me pushing range and having fun with it. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of what I'm not going to do again. And this is the 22nd book that I published.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of mistakes. So it was a kind reminder that first off, when the end product works, there are no mistakes.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best solutions that I had was because I found myself in that crux, and I was like, man, I messed this up. What am I going to do? And suddenly I realized the plot twist that I came up with. It's just stuff that I wouldn't have thought of originally. And it's also taught me to be even more open to that.
This was your first series, right? I mean, this is your first baby. This was, and do you feel like because of that, you hold on to it a little bit more than you would of the other 19 books that you have? Or do you feel like it's just a special part of the journey of the other 19 books?
Everything is part of is a part of the journey, and what it represents to me is different from other books, because I have other books that I might have achieved more from my initial checklist, but what I did in this series, it's like, wow, dude, when you take 4 steps back, your objective, and you allow yourself to have a beer and celebrate, and not go like, oh, it could have been better, I should have fixed this, because
and it's a hard thing for us to do.
Oh Lord, it is awful, but we're gonna have a drink and we're gonna celebrate. But dude, it's what I learned from myself of who I am as a writer and as a person and as a human, with each project, it's very important, just because you flex different muscles, and it's definitely a lot more effort. When you're writing a series, you can afford yourself to. It's like, we're gonna solve that, but when you get to that final book and you go like, oh, we gotta solve this. we gotta land it, or we have to intentionally leave it off the page. And that's when it gets intense. And I knew that it was going to be intense, but I didn't know how intense. And
it's a different type of intense, right? It's
the thing is that people go like, oh, so which book was harder? And I'm like, each one was harder for different reasons. And each one rewarded for different reasons, and each one hurt for different reasons. I just want people to see what I've done and go like, okay, maybe I want to try things on my own terms.
Nice
for them to allow themselves to do it. People go like, oh, I'm surprised. And I'm like, just because you see me, making as a banana secret agent doesn't mean that melancholy doesn't flow through me. I'm a child of the 90s.
Not only that, but you're a calm, rational person, so you kind of...
Oh, but I have a very passionate, impulsive, and I have a temper. And people go like, wow, where did this come through?
And
I go like, you haven't seen that. I work hard so that people don't see that part, but it's there.
I mean, it's there for all of us.
Don't poke the bear. It's simple. Don't poke the bear. And people go like, oh, is this going to bother him?